Our final debate of the day features Democratic candidates for Tarrant County District Attorney. Tiffany Burks has spent most of her 24 years as a lawyer working in the Tarrant County DA's office. Lawrence Larry Meyers served on the statewide Court of Criminal Appeals for 4 terms. Albert John Roberts served as a prosecutor in both the Dallas County and Tarrant County District Attorney's offices. He now runs a private practice. Rachel will kick off our final round of questions.
Mrs. Burks, you'll start us off. The Tarrant County District Attorney handles both civil and criminal cases while managing a staff of over 300 people. What's your experience practicing law, and how is that relevant to the position? Please be specific.
Thank you so much, and thank you, you all, for having us all here today. Tiffany Burks. I have worked as a prosecutor for the entirety of my career. I began actually in Fort Bend County, which is just south of Houston, as an assistant district attorney before moving to Tarrant County in 1999. From 1999 until I left the office in August of last year, I worked as an assistant district attorney working in the misdemeanor division, the juvenile division, the felony division, the gang unit. I also was promoted to the level of court chief, where I supervised and mentored younger lawyers in the practice of law, and was promoted to deputy chief in 2015, where I supervised over 100 lawyers in the criminal division, both misdemeanor and felony. My vast amount of experience has prepared me. The leadership that I've honed in over the last 24 years has prepared me for this position, and I can step in on day one and handle any type of case that comes before me.
Is Larry Myers supposed to say something now? Okay, Larry Myers is, okay, and the question was, what are your qualifications? Or what, why don't you repeat the question?
Yeah. What is your experience practicing law, and how is it relevant to the position?
My experience is pretty extensive. I've been involved in the criminal law situation for about 30 years. I was on the Court of Criminal Appeals for 24 years, and then I was on the Court of Appeals here on the term before that. We had at the court probably 200 or 300 people that worked there, a number of lawyers. So you know, I worked in a situation dealing with lawyers and staff for you know, a number of years. I've gotten board certified in criminal law, board certified in criminal appellate law. I have a master's degree in constitutional law, and I have been the course director for the Advanced Criminal Law Seminar for the State Bar of Texas, and I've also been on the commission that writes the test every year for the board certification. So I know criminal law backwards and forwards, and there's a lot of things involved in it that, you know, that you just don't see every day, and I've seen them.
So I want to start off by thanking Texas Wesleyan, thank you Fort Worth Report, thank you KERA, and thank you Steer Fort Worth, and thank you Sam for hosting this and moderating. My experience, I worked at the DA's office as a prosecutor, and right now I'm in private practice, so I work as a criminal defense lawyer. And I think that's a very unique experience to not only see cases through prosecution, but also have the opportunity to represent people when you walk into court. I'm the only person in this race who's worked on both sides of the aisle. And I say both sides of the aisle, understanding what it takes to make sure that the Constitution is protected. In the sense of, as a prosecutor, your role is not to convict, but to see that justice is done. And I think that's something that I take very seriously. And I know everybody that's running for this office hopefully takes it as seriously. But I would say at the same token, as a defensive lawyer, it's important that when you represent a client and you walk into that courtroom, that decision that that judge makes or that prosecutor makes ultimately has a lifetime impact on my client. So I bring that unique experience to this office.
And a reminder, 30 seconds for rebuttal or elaboration.
So I'll just elaborate a little bit on that, because, you know, Albert is right when it comes to prosecution and making sure that we see that justice is done and not seeking convictions. And that's exactly what I've been doing for the last 24 years here in Tarrant, 22 years here in Tarrant County, 2 years prior to that in Fort Bend County. It's very important that we look at cases and make sure that we're making the right decisions, because the community depends on us to make sure that we do that. And as prosecutors, we have a large amount of discretion in what we do in the district attorney's office. So it's really important that you have that, and I've been doing that, and I think it's important that you have someone who has been doing that for a while that can bring that experience to the DA's office.
Judge Myers, you'll have the first, you'll be able to respond first. Fort Worth and Tarrant County will be thrust into a national spotlight when the Aaron Dean trial is scheduled to start this spring. Regardless of the outcome, the trial is likely to be a painful process for our entire community. How would you handle high-profile cases like the Aaron Dean trial in a way that promotes fairness and inspires confidence in the judicial system?
Well, you're asking me a question that you're asking me a judicial question. You know, how will the judge conduct the trial? I mean, the DA will handle the trial just like they would any other case. They'll try to be fair, accurate, and thorough on all the issues and everything. So it's a case. You know, I've been part of a number of high-profile cases over the years. I've seen governors and congressmen and everybody come to the court there on convictions and indictments and everything. So it's a situation that we're going to depend upon the judge to be fair and everything, and we will take into account everything. And so it's really no different than any other case. It's just to make sure that all the facts and the laws are accurately applied, and that's how I would look at it.
Thank you for the question. And what I would say is, you're absolutely right. Tarrant County is going to be in a very unique place when and if that due process happens in that case. The life of Tatiana Jefferson matters, and I'll tell you, it matters not only to her family, but it matters to our entire community. Our community hurts. Our community is still in pain. That pain has suffered over 2 years. And I say over 2 years, I mean, they're still waiting for that date. It's different. And I say it's different because I don't know that Tarrant County's seen a case like this, in this century. I say this century, on this side of, the 2000s. Maybe like the early 90s was the last time a case with that high profile. But this case is different because we're in a day and age where social media, body cameras, people see, people feel, people know what happened, or they have strong opinions about what happened. We've seen this happen all across the country. And the delay in that trial is unfortunate, but I'll tell you, we need strong leadership at the top to make sure that we address the issues that are suffering in this county and build those community relationships and make sure we're able to reconnect the community with the trust that's needed at the DA's office.
And so over the years, I've handled some pretty high-profile cases, and I think there are 3 things that you have to do and that I would do as your elected district attorney. The first thing is transparency. You have to make sure that you are involving the community in that case and what's going on. Be open and honest about those issues that affect the community. Be transparent about those issues. And make sure that the DA's office is open to listening to what the community has to say about those particular issues that may come up. The second thing that's really important when it comes to these high-profile cases is the family of the victims of these cases. We have to make sure that the family has a good understanding about the pros and the cons, because the truth of the matter is the family is the biggest advocate that the district attorney's office or law enforcement can have with the community, and they can help to bridge the gap and soothe over any issues if the family has been made aware. The third thing, which I think is the most important thing, is we treat officer-involved shootings and officer-involved cases the same as we do civilian cases. And by that I mean the district attorney's office normally does not make a recommendation in that case, but under my administration we will be making recommendations just like we do citizens cases that go before the grand jury.
And all of you have 30 seconds to elaborate a little bit more or rebuttal.
I don't know if we need to rebut anything. You're asking us to forecast, how the case should be handled, and so as Tiffany just said, I think it should be handled just like any other case and everything. You always want to get the victims' families involved and things of this nature, but you've got to understand that the case is similar to a lot of other cases, and that you try to be to bring in, you know, exactly the same standards and things that you've done in other cases.
I'd like to add just one more thing. You know, my platform has always been from day one when I announced about rebuilding or restoring the public service commitment in the DA's office so that we can rebuild the public's trust. And so for me, in order for us to rebuild the public's trust in the criminal justice system, we have to make sure that we're serving the needs of the community. We do that in these types of cases when we actually bring cases to the grand jury and make a recommendation on it. Why is it that if someone commits an offense of murder, if a family member commits murder, and a prosecutor takes that case to the grand jury, they make a recommendation as to whether or not that case should be true billed or no billed. But we don't do that with police officers, and we should, because the prosecutors have the experience to know whether or not probable cause exists, and we can make those cases. So that's how we begin to build the bridge, is making sure we're treating all of those cases the same.
And I'll tell you, one of the prongs of my platform is more accountability. And so if we're serious about accountability, we have to make sure that we start at the top. Who your elected official is needs to be held accountable. You serve the citizens of this community, and we need law enforcement to know that they have to be held accountable. And I say held accountable in the sense of the worst thing that you can do for apples that are bad is put a bad apple in there. Good cops want to get rid of bad cops. And as your district attorney, I'm committed to making sure that we have good cops. And the best way that you can let good cops know that we're going to take care of business is that if something bad happens on our watch at the DA's office, we're willing to hold those bad officers accountable and take them through the judicial process just like every other citizen. Because all too often we find in Tarrant County, we've lost the trust because we found instances where officers have not followed the law and they haven't been held accountable, case after case. It just so happened when we get to this case,
Time's up.
And Mr. Roberts, you'll have the next question. In Texas, district attorneys have leeway in whether or not to bring a charge on some low-level crimes to prevent clogging up the courts with nonviolent offenses. Take marijuana, for example. Some counties, including Tarrant, have decided to put a policy in place so that people who are caught with small amounts of marijuana don't have to go through the court and have the charge cleared of their records. What specific policies do you propose to keep the courts running efficiently?
So I think that's a two-pronged question. You mentioned the courts being clogged up. I think of the jails being clogged up because the courts and the jails have somewhat of a semblance. They're very closely related. Before you go to court, you go to jail. Unfortunately, in Tarrant County, people are still prosecuted for possession of marijuana under 2 ounces. That is an offense that's arrestable. People are arrested, they go to jail, they post bond, they go to court. I'm in favor of not prosecuting possession of marijuana under 2 ounces. Low-level, nonviolent offenses don't need to be sitting in jail. People sitting in our jail are suffering from mental illness, substance abuse, and poverty. They're poor. That's why they can't get out. Not because they're guilty, because they're poor. And all too often, poor people come to court without representation, or they have to come to court with representation that they didn't choose because, again, they're poor. And so if we're going to make it a crime to be poor in Tarrant County, we need to do a better job of making sure we don't prosecute people solely for the sole reason that they're poor. So I'm not in favor of prosecuting low-level, nonviolent offenses because we got more violent offenses and more serious crimes that need to be spending our time and taxpayer resources on.
So the three things that Albert just mentioned with respect to poverty and drug addiction and mental health are the three issues that if you go to my website, you'll see that I mentioned and that I started talking about from day one when I decided to announce that I'm running for district attorney. And the way that I think that one of the policies that I'm going to change in the DA's office is the diversion programs. We've all heard about diversion programs and how they are utilized to direct people from the pipeline of incarceration, prison, and jail, and diverting them into resources within our community. For years, the diversion program has been a program where defense attorneys will fill out an application, see if they're eligible for it. If they are, then they go through the program. We're going to change that in the district attorney's office under my administration. And what we're going to do is we're going to start making diversion programs the norm as opposed to the exception, so that low-level, nonviolent offenses will all be looked at through a diversion unit so that we can figure out where in the community we can divert resources and divert people so that we can move them from the pipeline of incarceration into a pipeline of self-sufficiency.
I think the policy that the DA's office is conducting now is probably the smartest and the best one to do. And so I would just continue to do that at the low level. Misdemeanors like that don't need to be prosecuted.
And 30 seconds for elaboration or rebuttal.
So I'll say that we have a unique opportunity to end mass incarceration. Jails don't make us safer. Crime doesn't make us safer. Communities make us safer. People that go to jail and go to prison, they're gonna get out of jail, they're gonna get out of prison. They gotta come back home, they gotta come into our communities. We gotta put people back to work. We can't convict people solely for the purpose of just convicting people. We can't house people in our crowded jail where 20+ people died last year. We're suffering from a pandemic. There's no 6 feet of separation in our Tarrant County jail, I'll tell you that. What you got is, you got a system that's clogged up and it's backed up, and we gotta do something about it.
And so we talk about terms like mass incarceration, and I think it creates a response in all of us when we hear that. But we just can't say we're gonna eliminate mass incarceration. We have to have a plan to do that. And so in order to cut down the amount of people that are going into the prison system and the jail system, we have to do a couple of things. The first thing we have to do, diversion programs. They work to affect that type of change. The other thing is enhancements. If you may not know this, but if you commit an offense a certain number of times, you can be enhanced so that your punishment increases. And so we have to be very cognizant about how we utilize enhancements in the DA's office so that a person who might be looking at a 5-year minimum sentence is not looking at a 25-year minimum sentence. And that's how you start to end or tide mass incarceration. So let's just not use the term mass incarceration. Let's talk about ways that we can actually make that happen.
Ms. Burks, you'll start first with this question. How would you rate the performance of Department District Attorney Sharen Wilson? What specifically would you do differently?
Yes, so there are a lot of things that I think that I would do differently. One of them I've already mentioned, which is with respect to police officers. For years, when law enforcement critical incidents come in, we would take those cases to the grand jury, and we were not allowed to make a recommendation to the grand jury. We need to change that. We need to make sure that all of the cases are being treated equally and fairly. And that's a start, so we can build a bridge of public trust back with our community. Another thing that I would do is when Sharon came into office, she got rid of the narcotics unit. And I would bring a narcotics unit back into the DA's office. I think it's important, especially now, when we have a lot of cases involving opiates and prescription drugs, that it's important that we have a narcotics unit to work with law enforcement to try to stem the tide of overdose and other drug addiction issues that are plaguing our community. The last thing I would do is increase the number of people who handle violent crimes. Those attorneys were minimized when I was in the office, and we would increase that because we can see in our community that gun crime has gone up, and so we need to have experienced lawyers to handle those cases.
I would agree with nearly every recommendation that Tiffany makes, but the main thing I would do is sit down and try to organize the office in a more congenial, efficient way than our predecessor has done. She's made it an atmosphere that is not efficient to the practice of the DA. A number of good attorneys have had to either leave or forced out, and I would do that first, and then I would certainly, try to expand some of the areas that needed to be focused on and everything, but also try to work with the defense lawyers and the judges more. That's how you increase the situation that we're not overcrowding the jails, or that we're not putting people in prison that don't need to be put in prison, and that have a situation that it's broad-based and more efficient.
And so I'll try to answer the first part of your question. How is she doing? She's not doing a very good job. And I think that that sentiment resonates around the community. And I say that because we've seen all too often instances that either have been overlooked or been pursued, that if the role of a prosecutor is not to convict but to see that justice is done, we have to ask ourselves, why are we involved in political prosecutions in this town? And I say political prosecutions, I say names like Crystal Mason for voting, casting a provisional ballot that didn't count. I think of Rosa Ortega voting. These are voter intimidation tactics. That case was prosecuted not only with our DA's office, but with the Attorney General of Texas, Ken Paxton. I'll tell you, something I'll recommend as your next district attorney is that we allow defense lawyers like myself to go before the grand jury and make a grand jury presentation. That practice stopped under Sharen Wilson's administration. That would be something that I would reinstitute. Allow defense attorneys to go in and give the grand jury other information to consider during the grand jury, so when they make that decision whether or not they're going to indict or not, they have a full context of what the type of facts they're doing. Because if you indict something that's not good, it doesn't get better when it gets to a trial court.
And you have 30 seconds to elaborate or rebut.
So I just want to touch on one thing. Some of you may know or may not know, when I left the DA's office in August, the main impetus behind me leaving was because the office had become a more political office. Decisions were being made based on political reasons, and I'm a firm believer that politics should not play a role in our criminal justice system. So to that end, I think it's really important that whoever the district attorney is, and once you elect me as your next district attorney, I'll make sure that we keep politics out of the DA's office. We will be discussing criminal justice issues. We will have legislative liaisons in place to work with the legislature to change laws that are burdensome to our communities. And it's just very important that we are focused on criminal justice and not politics.
That's kind of a situation that you're not going to keep politics out of the DA's office. The Republicans have passed they've basically criminalized the election code. They didn't on their plea of voter fraud, they didn't amend the penal code at all. So basically, we're going to have, and this county is just loaded with Republicans. They're going to want the DAs, they're making the DAs have to enforce their claims of voter fraud. And basically, they're going to be on the DA all the time to get after people for that. And it's something that I would, as DA, would say, you know, no, we're not going to.
And so I came to the conclusion that we were on the wrong track 5 years ago. When I left the DA's office working for Sharen Wilson in 2017 and announced my candidacy in 2017. We ran in 2018, we got 47% of the vote. We're gonna win this race, and we're gonna win this race by being for the people. When we talk about being for the people and we talk about prosecutorial discretion, your DA has the ability to decide what to prosecute and what not to prosecute, what to prioritize and what not to prioritize. And I'll tell you, the number one priority in this community is public safety. Jails don't make us safer, political prosecutions don't make us safer, and prosecuting the election code that the Attorney General can't get his way out of, that doesn't make us safer.
And with that, we'll move into closing statements. We'll begin from the far side of the room on the back. So, Mr. Meyers, you can begin.
Well, I basically would just once again emphasize my experience, my education, my overall attitude in relation to all this race. I feel like there's a number of things that I've been experienced with that the DA has to look at that a lot of these candidates haven't done. I've participated in probably over 1,000 death penalty cases. We saw writs every day on everything, and that's a huge part of the DA's office is the writs of habeas corpus. There's the actual innocence situation that we're going to be facing even more so because of the fact that, you know, all these wrongful convictions that have happened over the years. And so these are things that I've not only, you know, participated in, I happen to write, you know, a number of opinions on. So it's a situation that you need somebody in there that has had the broad experience of all this, plus been a part of an organization with a number of lawyers and staff that knows what's going on. And I can bring that to this, and we can stop this voter suppression situation that the Republicans are putting on us.
So I just want to say again, thank you for allowing us all the opportunity to speak with you all today. I appreciate it. I'll say in the end here that it's not enough to just have experience. Just like it's not enough to just have a vision for a district attorney's office that reaches into the community to make real changes within the criminal justice system. What you need is a candidate who can bring you both, and that's what I bring. I have the experience with 24 years as an assistant district attorney, working with the community, with law enforcement, working in the courtroom every day, 24 years, serving the citizens of Tarrant County for 22 years, serving you. I also have a vision for a criminal justice system that works for everyone. And since I announced my candidacy, I have been out in this community talking with people. I have been talking with faith-based organizations, civic organizations, nonprofit organizations. We have found so many resources right here in the Tarrant County community of people who want to make a difference in people's lives. And so together we're going to work to build a criminal justice system under my administration that works fairly and equally for everyone.
Thank you for the opportunity to be here again. We're going to elect a new DA in 2022 in Tarrant County. And so the choice is clear. Either we're going to elect the status quo, what we've had and always had, or we're going to move in a different direction. Different directions sometimes are uncomfortable. When you take a new way home, it doesn't always feel the same. But I'll tell you, as long as you get home, and that's safety. And I say public safety. We're going to make sure that our community is safe. That's our #1 priority. But we're going to have to reprioritize what's important. And what's important is making sure that we keep violent offenders held accountable. And the low-level, nonviolent offenders, I'm not saying that we don't hold them accountable. What I'm saying is accountability measures can be taken differently. We can work with community-based organizations. We can work with community-based partnerships. There are opportunities for us to rethink or reimagine the criminal justice system. We don't have to do what we've always done. That's the definition of insanity. Do what we've always done and expect something different. It's just not going to happen. What I'm asking you to do is, in this Tarrant County race, vote for myself. And when you vote for me, realize you're voting for something brand new. You're voting to end mass incarceration, and you're voting for change in Tarrant County.
And that concludes our debate of candidates for Tarrant County District Attorney, Democratic candidates. Thanks so much.